What was it like checking in uh, as a second lieutenant, African American, there?
Um, it was it was okay. I mean, I didn't have any real challenges checking in. The company commander welcomed me because he only had one lieutenant with him in the company, so I was able to flesh out his tea a little bit more.
He
And we
had
had,
doubled his officers now.
oh yeah, yeah, and we only had two tanks in the company of 17 tanks because of the drawdown, and and the tanks were from coming back from Vietnam were in pretty bad shape. So it was a challenging time, but we had the racial tension was there. Um, we had the drugs that were in the area. So it was a really challenging time dealing with all those social issues, as well as trying to be the best Marine lieutenant you can be and getting ready to lead men into combat. And so we focused on training as much as possible, made sure that we got out to the field a lot. And I had a great staff sergeant who was Samoan. We went out to the field quite a bit, and he'd always find ways to help bring goodies to the field. Um, but I was pretty well received by the battalion. We had a good group of officers there, and I was only a bachelor in our company when we had a full complement of lieutenants. And so I would always take the holiday duty, and they would always bring me, turkey dinner or Christmas cake or whatever to make sure that I was taken care of. So I felt pretty good about being there. And one of the highlights was, the company commander is usually a captain's job, and I was fortunate to get a tank gun company as a first lieutenant, junior first lieutenant, and had the chance to take a whole company of tanks, of 17 tanks, to 29 Palms for an exercise with 2nd Marine Regiment. And that was a pretty great time for me as a lieutenant. I'm in the desert with 17 tanks. I got my little scarf on, got my shades on, and we're got 16 tanks behind me and a whole bunch of trucks and stuff. And I always felt like I was Watash. But it was a great time and a very serious time, obviously. But I think I was just fortunate to be in the right place at the right time.
Wow, wow, that's a pretty good story. I can only imagine sitting there and you just looking to your left and you're looking to your right and see all that firepower there.
Oh yeah, yeah. And ironically, during the exercise of 29 Palms, we were there for 4 weeks, and I was able to tell my guys to make sure they did the right thing by maintaining the vehicles properly. In that dust environment, it can get pretty bad. And unfortunately, the platoon commander for the Amtrak's didn't quite have that same mentality. He let his guys drive their vehicles like crap, and they all crapped out before the big exercise, the
Ooh,
final exercise that time. And I still had tanks running. We were able to support the regiment. And at the very end, we went to the Oak Club with the regimental commander and battalion commander, and the operations officer was so happy that he kissed me at the bars. But it was one of those affectionate things where you just kind of appreciate the fact we supported them very well, and we had a good time with supporting that unit.
so it must have just broke your heart when you heard the commandant announce that tanks were going away.
Yeah, it did. It really hurt, but I realized that the tanks are pretty heavy equipment.
Oh,
It's 70 tons of the greatest tank in the world, but clearly you have to take a look at being kind of light and mobile. And the 70-ton tank is really tough to do that with. So I hope they come up with something that's going to be a little bit less, would be lethal, but not quite as heavy.
yeah, yeah, you could understand it. I just remember the first time I saw tanks at an exercise out there at 29 Palms, and all you can do is shake your head because you see lots of dust and noise, and then when you see those tanks unleash and start firing for effect, oh my word,
Oh yeah, yeah.
it's loud.
It's an
It's
awesome vehicle and an awesome machine of warfare. And I just really appreciate the guys that put the time in to make sure they can work it properly. And these young men that we had working for us were just hard charges and really try to make a difference by making sure they're doing the right thing for their equipment.
and when you were serving as CO, did you have many African American Marines under your command?
Um, there were probably, I'd say, around 10% or so.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it was a decent group in the fold. And there was one that was a Lance Corporal at the time, Lance Corporal Stewart, or call him well. And I was short of a tank commander, so I said, "Okay, Stewart, this is your chance to have a tank, be a tank crew leader." And so I gave him a tank, and I gave him, 3 PFCs. And initially, he had a hard time. He was having a tough time, and so we went out to the field one night, and I said, "Okay, this is gonna be make or break week for you because things are not going very well." And so by the end of that week, his tank was the best one out there. I'm like, "What'd you do?" He said, "Sir, I can't tell you." I said, "Good enough. I don't want to know." But he was able to get his tank crew in ship shape, and they came out doing really well. So I have to really admire him, and I think he went on to make gunnery sergeant and retired from the Marine Corps after that. And another young sergeant, Sergeant Jackson, who was from New York, just an all-around great leader. Um, I just really enjoyed working with him and others in the unit. But those two were just outstanding. So I had a mixed bag of all different kinds, and had some racial issues there we had to kind of put down, but we got through that, and I think the unit overall performed pretty well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that during your career, did you have to right any wrongs that you saw for where tension started getting high?
Yeah, we had some challenges with some guys flying Confederate flags on their tanks. Um, we had another Marine who was in Vietnam and came back, and we had the refugees that they're bringing over from Vietnam to put into Camp Talega until they get places in the United States. And he came back, and he was at the when the security for the compound, and he was saying things like "Go home, gooks" and stuff like that, which is unfortunate. So we had to get him out of there and give him some counseling. And for the ones that were out there with showing their Confederate pride, we had to get that straightened out real quick, make sure that we're all one team and not just separate entities. So it was challenging. And then you throw in some of the things that were prevalent at the time, where the drugs that were just so prevalent back then. It was you had a lot to deal with. But overall, I think that we were able to kind of keep a lid on most of it by talking to them on a regular basis. When we found guys that were bad actors, we had to root them out, get them out of there, and then move on to make sure they could train properly. And I think one of the best things was when when the draft ended, the Marine Corps started taking on, pardon me, better quality recruits. And it was amazing to see the difference from the initial time I got in to about 8, 10 years later when the Marines were just picture perfect. I would say not. They were just much better than what we had before. So I really enjoyed the fact that the commandant recognized we had to make some changes. We did that, and we got in a better product that kind of helped make sure the Marine Corps stayed out of the muck and mire of a lot that was going on at the time.
Yeah, I've heard other people make that comment that draft days, yeah, you had some that wanted to stay, uh, but some that went, "Oh my God, I'm a Marine," and didn't want to be there. And then after the draft days, everyone that became a Marine wanted to be a Marine, and you could see the difference
Absolutely.
in the people. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
uh, during your career, boss, did you have a mentor or different mentors as you were progressing? From your second lieutenant days all the way up.
Yeah. There was not just one throughout, but it was several that kind of called me to the side and said, "Look, you ought to do this. You ought to do that." In particular, I mentioned John Ermston, who's now passed away, unfortunately. Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel buddy of mine. He invited me to be his operations officer at the unit in Atlanta when I was in the comm company CEO in Greensboro. So I'm thinking I'm working in Eden, North Carolina, and you asked me to go to Atlanta on my own dime to drill every month, and that's about a 8-hour drive. So I had to think about that one long and hard, but he liked what I did with the company, and he respected my work ethic and everything. So he invited me to come and join the unit there, and I said, okay, I'll do it. And from that point, I was able to become the XO for the battalion, and then the CG for the unit at the time invited me to be the commanding officer. But that was before they had the command screening boards. So he invited me to be the commanding general for commanding officer rather for the battalion. So his mentorship helped me to get to that level, and then being at as a battalion commander, I was at CAX one year, and I told the CG I wanted to do a CAX. Every year I was CG or commanding officer, and he said, "You want to do that?" I said, "Sure." So that's where you want to really hone your skills at the 29 Palms Training Center, because everywhere else is kind of not as challenging, but you really hone your skills there, and you're going to make some mistakes, but you learn and grow from them. So I took on the challenges of taking the CAX Command Dome exercise there at 29 Palms, and there I worked for the 25th Marines CO, Colonel Arms, and he liked the way I operated, and he said, "You ought to come up to be my XO for the 25th Marine Regiment." And I'm thinking, "You want me to do that?" He said, "Yeah, you can do that." So there I am, still living in North Carolina. 25th Marines, as you know, is in Massachusetts. So again, on your own dime, you have to get up there to drill. And clearly, they did start offering the rooms at night. They would pay for it, you could stay in, but travel was on your own. So I said, let me think about this a little bit. And I called him up and said, "Sure, I'll go ahead and do that." So I took advantage of his advice, invited me up there, and I was XO for 2 years. And then just because he saw something in me, and I listened to I respected him as a colonel, as a leader of Marines, was able to work out pretty well. So from that, just taking on any assignment I found that could be a challenging one that did what Marines always do: go to the field and train Marines and accomplish the mission. That's what I wanted to do, and so that helped. Having those kind of people look out for you, kind of give you advice to say, you ought to take advantage of this. And certainly Ron Coleman, the 3-star that retired from Manpower, was a good mentor, along with Cliff Stanley, who was the first, I think he was the first lieutenant at the time, and I was at the TBS, and he wasn't yelling at me. So I was amazed that this lieutenant wasn't yelling at this poor second lieutenant, but he was just a great friend and a good mentor, and advised me on certain things. So I've had several mentors throughout the years, and I think the key is to not dismiss somebody's recommendation offhand. Just listen to it, understand why they're asking you to do certain things, and then make your own decision. And because they saw something in me that they liked, and the way I operated, and I respected them, I was able to take advantage of their advice and then move on to the next level. So yeah, mentorship is very important, and you're not sure when you're getting it, but clearly it's maybe just a word here or something there that says, you ought to think about this, and consider that as mentorship. Some people do more hands-on, but that helped me out a lot. So